Hello, hello. This is Dr. Amigues from Unabridged MD, and I'm here to provide hope driven by science. So thank you so much for the response on the previous videos that I have posted in the podcast. It really makes me happy to know that it does help people. And thank you for some of the questions that I've received since. So one of them I want to address right away because it's an important one, and I think I do want to answer that question right away. So it's how do you deal with fear? And because of my own story with stage 4 breast cancer, and because of my interaction with patients, we have to acknowledge the fear, and I think that's a very important part. You cannot just wish it away. It's just not gonna go away, and it's gonna be there. And if you don't acknowledge it and don't look at it with a clear mind and like really compassion about that fear, it's gonna haunt you, and it's gonna wake you up at night, and it's gonna come in all of the things that you're gonna do. So, how do you deal with fear? First of all, you look at it, and then you have different mechanism to take care of it. In the sense of, for example, I'll give you an example actually, but basically you can acknowledge it and then look at what works for you. So I'll give you an example I'll give you my own example. So my kids were very preemie. They were born at 25 weeks, so that's like a full trimester early. They were translucid. They had no eyes. It's like the skin of the eyelids were completely fused, and of course they needed a respirator. I mean, not the ideal situation. Definitely not ideal. Very scary. 100 days early, and I personally chose the path of not looking at any research in medicine. Why? Because I thought, look, they're here. Whatever happens, happens. I'm going to help as much as I can, but I'm going to be a parent, and I'm not going to pay too much attention to the numbers. What did that mean? That meant that for me, if I had looked at the numbers, the survival rate, the risk of mental retardation, the risk of any sort of disability, I would have sort of tattooed my brain with some sort of ideas that was a possibility. And I made a clear decision in me when I delivered those babies that I was going to be grateful to have babies because I had had so much trouble getting them, but that I was going to be a mom and not a doctor at that moment. Interestingly, their dad actually sort of went into his fears, and to control his fears, went into a mode of intellectualization, and so he became an expert. And their dad is extremely smart, extremely knowledgeable doctor, and so he just knew all there was about every single scientific studies about preemie. And it was wonderful, right? So he would basically have those really highly intellectual conversations with the doctors, while I was literally doing rhymes and singing songs that made no sense to my kids. Why? Because for me, the fear was to look at any sort of outcome that was not good. And for him, knowledge was power. And so that's like, we all have different ways of dealing with fears. But it was important to realize, well, for me, I don't want to know the numbers, because I know that if I see, I don't know, I'm going to give I actually have never looked. I did not want to look. And the kids are doing amazing. They speak 2 languages. They, my son and my daughter are above average when it comes to reading. It's crazy. Like, it's so good. And they are 6 years old, so they have a ton of time to do more. But it's kind of interesting to just think, we had two different approaches. And as a mom, I wanted this approach that was mom related and not scientific. But the point I want to say here is that the statistic would not have helped me. And they would have potentially scared me, because every time you do a statistic, every time you look at statistics in the literature of medicine, you're outdated. That is why I tell my patients, don't look at internet for outcome, because you do not know what the patients that are described have gone through. You do not know what team they had. You do not know what their story is, and you do not know if how long it was. And so every year and every 6 months, honestly, sometimes in rheumatology and in oncology, there are more treatments that are coming around. And so someone from 10 years ago did not have access to all of the medications that we have access to. So for example, my HER2 positive cancer, if I had had that cancer 20 years ago, I would have been dead in 3 months, or maybe 6 months if I was lucky. But with the medications that we have now, it's a totally different ballgame. And so I really explain this to all of you and to my patients and to everyone. Don't look at numbers, because they are outdated. To give you a survival curve rate, you need 10 years, you need 5 years, right? And so that means that it's 5 years from now. It's outdated. It's just outdated. It's not going to tell you the whole picture. It's going to give an idea for the doctors. That's great. But it's actually not giving the whole picture. One, because you don't know who it was, right? And so that's number one. Number two is because there are new treatments every day. So that's number one. And then the second thing is realizing that numbers don't actually mean anything. What was the risk of me having preemie? I mean, yeah, I had twins. Okay, so yeah, there's a risk. But a 25 weekers, that's not it's very low, the risk. And the truth is that even if it's 1%, if it happens to you, that 1% doesn't really help you, because you're like, well, it happened to me. But you can switch this and be like, well, even if it's a small numbers, it can also happen to me. Like if it's in small good outcome numbers, that can also happen to me. Why not, right? So that's the first thing. I think just know yourself and know what reassures you. And if, ignorance is bliss, in rheumatology, I want to know absolutely everything. In medicine in general, I want to know everything. But when it came to me, when it came to my own, my own struggles with the prematurity of the kids and my own mortality risk with cancer, I decided to not look. And that really helped me, because then I could focus on just the good outcome. Focus on, I'm going to believe that there is some treatments nowadays that are working, and I'm going to take it, one step at a time. So that's the first thing. Second thing is to acknowledge it. And it's hard. It's really hard, right? Because you don't want to spend too much time acknowledging it. But at the same time, you've got to acknowledge. And so it's sort of this nagging kid, right? Like, mommy. And you've got to pay attention, because the moment you pay attention is the moment you can actually resolve. So, let's say, for example, for me, it was the fear of dying. That fear, basically, I decided that I was going to look at it, and I was like, okay, well, so let's imagine the worst. I die. What's happening? Well, I die. I'm not here. That's not fun. But at the same time, who's going to suffer more than me? I'm not going to suffer if I'm dead, right? So that's number one. And so just acknowledging, so what's the worst that can happen? I die. All right, so let's see. And for me, that helps, right? Because then it's kind of shutting off the mind going in that direction. It's basically saying, okay, well, I'm going to agree on the fact that we all die one day. And I'm going to and I'm going to just tell my fear, well, here it is. I know there's a risk. And in fact, every day that when I wake up, there's a risk of me dying, right? Like, because you don't know what's going to happen in the street. I mean, we didn't know COVID would happen. We didn't, you never know what's going to happen in life. And so acknowledging the fact that there's a risk with living also makes you acknowledge the fact that you've got to live, and you've got to live in that moment. And that was very powerful to me, because that moment that I acknowledged the fact that, yes, I was really scared of dying, I also acknowledged it, and I also said, well, be it, right? I'm not going to spend all my energy when I'm living to think of this, because it's basically, I'm going to only think of this instead of thinking of life and what I want and what do I want in this life. And, I have this chance of having something that's allowing me to think very clearly about my life, and I'm going to take it as a gift. I'm going to make very good connection with people, and I'm going to live every day as a gift. And that shifts your perspective on things, because you're not trying to hold off to something thinking like, oh, someone is going to steal it from me, or I'm going to lose it. You're basically you're looking at this flower knowing that, yeah, the flower is going to go, but right now it's a beautiful flower and I'm going to enjoy every minute of it. And it changes the way you approach things. So that's like another thing that helped me, is to kind of to imagine the worst and just let it sit and be like, I'm gonna die one day. I just hope that it's the longest possible away from me, but at the same time, I'm not gonna spend my time thinking about this. Complications, right? A lot of my patients think of complications, and it's the same thing. Why think of the complication when your time would be so much better spent at thinking of healing and thinking of you? How does the you in health looks like? And we're not doing wishful thinking. We're just saying, let's have an exercise in your mind that's like, how does healthy, how does happy and joyful looks like, right? And you're not saying, okay, well, if I didn't have this, then I would be happy. No, you're going to say, yeah, well, how does happy looks like? And there are things, right? Like in a condition, there are things that are helpful, right? So is it the fear? Like, is it because you're afraid of certain complication, or is it because you're having pain when it comes to arthritis? Is it because you're having fatigue? And so on. And just realize at that point, maybe at that moment, that, well, maybe at that moment, I'm not dying. Maybe at that moment, I'm not in pain. Maybe at that moment, I'm still able to enjoy the music that I'm listening to. So it's really taking a breath, and I'm doing it right now, and putting fear next to you, and just say, hey, you can sit next to me, and we're gonna look at this together. What do you need from me? And let's talk, because right now I'm me. Fear is not me. And start from this acknowledgement of fear is here. It's going to sit next to me, and it's going to be okay. I think it's extremely valuable to look at fears in a very objective way. So you can journal. And you can, I love journaling. I used to never like journaling, and then I decided to try, and I was just like, wow, actually this is super helpful. It's like therapy, therapy, but like a million almost, because you're looking, like your thought process are written. And so journaling really helped me, and I don't know, you could try it. It's basically taking a pen and just starting to write without any sort of expectations, right? So my handwriting is horrible, and I don't try to make it good. And I don't try to make it grammatical. They don't have to make sense. It's okay. It's just my thoughts, like literally my thoughts to my pen. And what's really interesting is that it unstuck me, right? It's like my thoughts. So for example, we'll take like a fear that the medication would not work, right? So yeah, I'm afraid that medication will not work. And then I would go into like, what does that mean? The reason I'm so scared about this is because of that things. If the medication doesn't work, what does it mean? And what's interesting is that you kind of realize at one point that it decreases your stress, and that you actually find solutions. And those solutions, they help you take care of the fear and tell your fear, we've got solutions for you, right? We've got plan A, B, C, D, E, right? And so it's okay. Stay there. It's okay. All right. There are more techniques for sure, but I think acknowledging the fact that you have fear is very important, and putting them down on paper and not spending all of your time on the fear, but rather think of what the fear is teaching you and think of it objectively, and then fix what there is to fix. So if you're afraid that you're gonna go before you finished a will, or whatever, or maybe before you've done something that you really wanted to do that, and then move on. And then move on, because the goal is to live a full life. The goal is not to live restricted by the fear. If you have a condition, the goal is to see how we can take care of the condition and how that condition can help you. What is it bringing you? What is it teaching you? Because we can learn from every single situation there is, and we can learn from fear. There is no doubt about this. In fact, I want to finish on this. Most likely, you will grow from that fear, or from those fears, because it's when we are uncomfortable that we grow. And you will look at this and you will be, wow, that really helped me go past something. So I hope this helped. I would love to hear what you guys are doing to help with those. This is just some example. We have many more. We can definitely look at this more in the future. Again, it's a pleasure. I'm Isabelle Amigues, rheumatologist and internist, and I'm creating this movement called Unabridged MD. So we have a full holistic view of how to care for patients, and it's a hope driven by science. Please subscribe, like, comment, so ask me questions personally or through those comments. And you can register to my waitlist to get more information when I do the website and so on. It's an absolutely pleasure. With gratitude. Take good care. Bye-bye.